Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. We'll start the 7th parak in Mirz Hashem on Daf Samach Zayin Omid Beis. Misha Chazo Kurdaikus. Kurdaikus is some sort of state of delirium. And Rashi says that it's the name of a demon, as we'll see in the Gemara later on. And it's a result of someone who drinks too much fresh wine. The Omar, and he declares, Kisvu get li ishti lo Omar klum. In other words, he's a shota, and therefore he does not have das to be mitzaveh to divorce his wife. Lo Omar klum. Omar kisvu get li ishti v'omar lo tichtevenu. I'm sorry. Omar kisvu get li ishti v'chazo kurdaikus. In a case where he was shafui b'daito, he was perfectly normal, and he commanded Eidim to write the get. Now he becomes kurdaikus, and he's choser, he retracts what he said before, and he says lo tichtevu ein dvar v'achronim klum. His bitul of the shlichus is not valid. And therefore, the original shlichus is still in place, and the get can be delivered, and she's megureshes. Nishtatek. What about the case of a person who is not kurdaikus, but he's in a state of ilmus, meaning he cannot speak? The Ambulo Nichtav get lishva. They asked him, "Shall we write a get for your wife?" And he nodded his head, indicating that he's in favor of giving the get. Then now we have to see if he's shafui b'daito, if he has das. So both can also shlosha pa'amim, v'yam omar, alav lav, v'alhein hein, areze elu yiktevu v'yiknu. So they test him 3 times. And if he gives the right answers, yes or no, on these 3 occasions, then we know that he is still lucid, and therefore we can write the get and give it to his wife based on Harchanas Rosho. Now, it would seem from the Mishnah that we ask him actually all told 6 questions. 3 questions where he's supposed to say yes, he nods his head, and 3 questions where he indicates no. And if he passes the test of 6 questions, then we can assume that he's a vardas. Now, what would be if, for example, he could answer 5 out of the 6? Would that be enough? And that's going to be an issue. The Gemara says, "My kurdaikus." What's the meaning of the word kurdaikus? Amar Shmuel, de nachte chamra chadata de ma'atzarta. He was overwhelmed as a result of chamra chadat, of drinking new wine, fresh wine from the wine press. Matzarta is the wine press. And this wine could bring a person to a state of delirium, of mental incapacitization. He's not incapable because he imbibes this fresh wine. And therefore, when he's mitzvah to write the get, it's not valid. Frek the Gemara, why doesn't the Mishnah just simply state that Nishacho, he was overwhelmed by new wine? Why do you call it kurdaikus? And the Gemara answers, Hakamashbalan, to Harucha kurdaikus shma, that this kind of a shade that possesses him because he over-imbibes new wine is called kurdaikus. Well, why does the Mishnah have to tell me it's kurdaikus l'maynaf kemina likmeya? Because if you want to get rid of a shade, then you write an amulet, and the law is that the amulet can only be effective if you mention the shade by name, and therefore it's important for us to mention the shade by name, and it's called kurdaikus. Maya sute. And now we're about to embark upon a long Gemara about Talmudic medicine. how can we bring this person back to health? And the Gemara answers, Bisra Sumka, which is meat that hasn't been fully cooked. It's basically still lean meat, and it was put on coals, and that's called gumre. V'chamra marka, and we give him marka means when you add too much water to wine, it becomes watered down wine, but it still has a little bit of the taste of the wine that could counter the effect of the wine that he drank before. Amar Abaye, Amar li Aim. Now, Aim literally translates as mother, but Abaye was born without a mother. His mother died at childbirth. So the mother here means the woman who brought him up. And she's quoted throughout Shas as a very intelligent woman. Abaye learned a lot from her, from his stepmother. And he learned from her many different remedies. The first one is L'shim Shabas Yoma. A person suffered from a sunstroke, and it's on the first day. And Kuza de Maya, a cup full of water. Apparently, he's dehydrated. And Kuza is actually the name of a vessel made out of earthenware, and it holds approximately 1 revius of liquid. And this is going to bring him back to health. Bas tre Yomi. However, if he had a 2-day-old sunstroke, so he's been sick now for 2 days, sikure. Sikure is when they take the blood out of your body, bloodletting. Bas tlosa Yome, if he's already has this sunstroke for 3 days, and then bisra sumka, and that we saw before is lean meat. Gumre, which is broiled on coals, v'chamra marka, and watered down wine. The shimshatika, if it's already more than 3 days old, laisi tarnagola uchmisa, bring a black tarnagoles, a hen. The likre shesivar, if we cut it both lengthwise and crosswise, ulegal chelevitziyasa dereisha velosve. And we shave the middle of the person's head, and we put the chicken on top of it. We leave the chicken on its head until it sticks to the head. Let him go down into the water. Leku means to stand up in the water. Ad savare, until the water reaches his neck. Ad alma iluye, he's about to faint. V'lemod, v'lesek, v'lesev. He still has enough energy to swim and come up from the water and sit down, take it easy until he recovers. V'lav, if that doesn't work, or he doesn't have the wherewithal to do this, lechul karse. Karse is leeks. He should eat leeks. V'linchos v'lekum v'maya. Once again, he should go down and stand up in the water at savar until it reaches his neck. Ad cholish alma, until he's so faint that he just can muster up enough energy. V'lemud v'lesalik v'lesek. Then he swims and he comes up the water, sits down until he recovers. Now, we're going to see that for a different illness, there's a contrasting remedy. L'shimsha bisra sumka kumre v'chamra marke. For a 3-day-old sunstroke, we said the remedy is lean meat that's broiled on coals and watered down wine. But l'salga bisra shmeina gumre v'chamra chia. Now we're talking about just the opposite illness. Instead of sunstroke where he's overheated, we're talking about someone who is chilled. In other words, he caught some sort of a cold and he was exposed to cold and therefore he had a fever. And what's the remedy for that? Fatty meat, just the opposite of lean meat, again broiled on coals. And in this case, instead of drinking diluted wine, he should be drinking undiluted wine. Rav Amram Chasida. The Gemara now tells a story about Rav Amram the Chassid. Ki avi mitzarim le bei reish galusa. Now, Reish Galusa is the head of the exilarch, and he was basically the political representation of the Jewish people in Bavel. And generally speaking, it was somebody from the descendants of Beis David. However, the staff members of the Reish Galusa were very often people who abused their authority. They took over power. And Rav Amram Chassid was someone who very often, when they would confer with him for halachic rulings for the Reish Galusa, he would take a very chumrah, very strict and stringent stance. And the servants of the Reish Galusa, as we said before, they were very often power-hungry people, and they would intimidate people like Rav Amram Chassid. Havamagnu le atalga. What they did was, when he went to sleep, they would open up the windows and the snow would come in. He would catch a very bad cold. Lemachar amrule. The next day they would say to him, "My nichule lamar delaisule. What would you like us to bring you?" Amar, he would say to himself, "Hani kol amina lahu mepech apche." Whatever I say to them, they'll do the opposite. So he figured if he's going to say the opposite, request the opposite of what he really needs, then maybe he'll get the right remedy. So he said to them, Bisra sumka agumre vechamra malka. Give me lean meat broiled on coals and watered down wine, which is a very good remedy for sunstroke, for overheating. So I see they brought him just the opposite. Bisra shmena, fatty meat, agurma that was broiled on the coals, vechamra chaya, and undiluted wine. He got the exact remedy that he needed. Shama Yalsa was Ashes Rav Nachman, and she heard about Rav Amram and his suffering. He was suffering from the cold, and even though he took the remedy, the cold was still lingering on. So she brought him to a bathhouse. She had him stand up in the hot bath waters. Rav Amram was perspiring from the hot water, and his perspiration went into the water and changed the color of the water. It became like blood-like. It had like a redness to it. And his flesh was covered with round blotches. And eventually he survived. So it was a combination of the fatty meat, the potent wine, warming himself up in the hot water, and all these would eventually bring and draw the excess fat, the alcohol from his pores, and he remained in the water as long as his flesh was left with pale spots on. Rav Yosef Asik Berechaya. Rav Yosef, when he had a chill, he would sweat up. How did he create a sweat? He would engage in turning the mill, and then he schwitzed. Rav Sheshes, he asik b'chshure. Now, both Rav Yosef and Rav Sheshes were blind. Rav Sheshes would engage in carrying beams, but apparently, despite their blindness, they could perform different forms of strenuous activity that was safe for them, and they would sweat, and that would break the chill. Omar, Rav Sheshes declared, how great is labor, it warms up those who practice labor. Now it seems that although until now we were talking about the victim of the Avdei Reish Galusa by the name of Rav Amram Chassid, Rav Sheshes was likewise a victim of the persecution of the Avdei Reish Galusa. We'll see soon that they even wanted to murder him. Amalei Reish Galusa, Rav Sheshes, my time alo soid mar gabon. Why is it that you don't eat with us? Amalei delomalu avde, because your servants are not virtuous. The chashide ha'ever menachai, they might actually serve me Ever minachai. Omole miyemar. So the Reish Galusa said to him, how do you know such a thing? Who's going to tell me that's true? Omole hashta machavinalach. I'm going to prove it to you. Imagine, this is Rav Sheshes, who's blind, is going to prove to the Reish Galusa that his servants would eat Ever minachai. Omole l'shamet. Rav Sheshes told his Heisbach, Zil gnov aisi lichada karamechevor. The servants of the Reish Galusa are preparing a meal from an animal and steal one leg of the animal. Bring it to me. Aisile. So they brought him a leg of the animal. Amalei Rav Sheshes turns to the servants of Reish Galusa. Ahadmu li hadmig dechevasa. Lay out for me the cuts of the animal. They took out 3 legs because the 4th leg was stolen. So if Sheshes says, was this a 3-legged animal? And basically he was challenging them. Are you serving me some sort of blemished animal at the table of the Reish Galusa? They were so nervous that they immediately severed a leg from an animal that was alive, brought it to him, placed it in front of him, and they claimed this was the 4th leg. Of course, that wasn't the 4th leg. Come and bring you the leg that you stole. Osve, he placed it there. So Rav Sheshes turns to the servants of Rav Reish Galusa. Hi, bas chamesh raglayim havi. Was this a 5-legged egg? 5-legged animal? Obviously, you took another leg from a live animal, and this is how Rav Sheshes exposed the servants of Reish Galusa to prove their sinful activity of bringing Ever Menachai and trying to serve it to Rav Sheshes. Amalei. Reish Galusa says, okay, fine. You know what? You don't want to trust my servants. But li'avid kamei demar v'lechol, let the servants prepare a meal in the presence of Mar, of Rav Sheshes, or according to one Girsa Shamei, the attendant of Rav Sheshes, and then v'lechol, and then the master will eat with us. Rav Sheshes said, fine. Krevu taku kamayu. So they brought a table in front of him. Right in those days, they used to eat on small tables. The Isakami Bistros, they brought meat before Rav Sheshes and before the Reish Galusa. Vosivu Kame Ristina de Chanko Kamsa. And they placed in front of Rav Sheshes a portion that can choke those who are blind, meaning they left a very sharp bone in the meat, hoping and assuming Rav Sheshes would swallow the meat and he would choke. Gashashe, Rav Sheshes started feeling the meat. V'shakle krocha b'sudre. He found a hidden bone. He took the portion of meat, wrapped it up in a scarf. And the servants were curious to see what Rav Sheshes had tucked away. L'basa diachil, after Rav Sheshes ate, Amri le, and here we start Daf Samaches.